This is the Prestigious Initiative, and these are the points. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today we had our conversation with Bernice George. Do you have any feedback or takeaways right off the back from our conversation, or rather your conversation with her?
Yes, sir. Well, firstly, I was very impressed with Bernice and everything she had to say. I think that I mentioned it in the episode too, but it's such a important topic that sometimes I think tends to be pushed to the side, which is another reason why it's so important. But also, it does extend or transcend some boundaries. So I know that she specifically likes to, or not likes to, but her expertise is dealing with women and specifically advocating for them and helping them to advocate for themselves. But I think we can all benefit from it, whether or not we're a woman or a man or anything in between. I think these are important things for us to develop and work on. But I do think that at the end of the day, it's more important that we help to advocate and empower women, which is exactly what Bernice is doing. And you can tell by the way she spoke and the things she had to say that she cares a lot about this topic and about women and about people in general. And so it was wonderful to sit down and talk to her and really just, I felt like I was getting a master class in this topic from someone who really knows what they're talking about and really cares about that topic.
Yeah, the first topic that we discussed was having a coherent identity, which is essentially how consistent you are, how you show up as a consistent person across the different areas of your life, your personality, your likes, your dislikes. Really, are you one person in this sort of setting, or are you a different person in a different setting? Would be a lack of coherent identity. But having a coherent identity, showing up as the same type of person wherever you go, is definitely key to allowing other people to know who you are, how you're going to be, and not just outside of work, but at work as well. And I thought that was a very beneficial kind of topic in connection with having the opportunity to advocate for yourself. Knowing who you are is a key to being able to advocate for yourself. You can't advocate for yourself if you don't necessarily know who you are. That would be trying to build a house on sand. It wouldn't work. So having a coherent identity, of course, is key to self-advocacy. Do you have any takeaways from that?
I think it's, like you said, it's important to keep in mind across many different aspects of life, not only because you want to be consistent to the people you come across, but also to yourself. If you are constantly trying to switch roles or switch, maybe not roles, but switch who you are, I think it makes it twice as hard to develop your own self advocacy and self identity and empower yourself because you don't really know who you are. And I think Bernice talked about her ebook, talking about developing your identity and becoming consistent in your identity. She said, "You are not you." And I think that it's beneficial for all of us to sit down and have a time, maybe it's guided through an ebook or by a coach or something else, where you really, again, sit down and define who you are. And that's something we talk about in practically every single episode of this podcast, is having your values and your goals and aligning those things so that you are consistent. And that's a good way to put something that I think we've been advocating for as a podcast for well, the whole time.
Yeah. And one thing that she said was having a coherent identity can serve as your roadmap to be the type of person you want to be, that will, like you said, will align yourself with your values. And of course, that will help others know, like when you have a coherent identity, then other people can know by default what your coherent identity is. And that will help in connection with self-advocacy, them knowing who you are. Because lots of times you associate with people, you talk to people, you're around people, you don't necessarily know who they are, and you see them out with somebody else and they're acting wildly different, then they lack that coherent identity. And so that is having I guess that's a new concept to me. Having a coherent identity is not something I have thought about or experienced previously, but what a key concept to not being a wishy-washy type of person, for lack of better, like it's show up as yourself, who you are, know who that is, and be consistent in that person that you show up as. That acting as a roadmap will help to guide you and shift and mold you to the person that you want to be, because that's the person who you are consistently showing up as.
And I think it's interesting too, because the way you're breaking that down could happen multiple ways, but I think there's two things I'm thinking of now. Number one, you define and uh, identify who you are as yourself, and then you hold yourself accountable to be that person in all areas of your life, by yourself, with your family, with your friends, in public, at work. You hold yourself to that standard because you've identified your values, your goals, your character traits, your responsibilities, whatever it is. You defined yourself and you hold yourself to that. And the other side of that too, I think, which is kind of more of what you're alluding to, is you've defined who you are to other people, and then you hold yourself to be that same person in all those other areas as well. Does that kind of make sense? Like, instead of it coming from me and extending outward, I'm first putting that, here's who I want to be out in public or in work. Okay, well, how do I make sure that the person that I am in public is also the same person that I am in private? And again, maybe there's many ways to go about it, and maybe one is more effective than the other. But thinking about how we're talking now, being consistent and how you can go about doing that, whether it start with yourself or start on what you want people to see, and then slowly funnel that into working on yourself and making yourself that person. But it is a huge, powerful, well, advocate in making sure that you are consistent and really trying to be the person that you want to be.
And speaking of self advocacy, she talked about how self advocacy will help to set the example as far as what other people can strive for in the workplace. When you advocate for yourself, other people will start to see that as basically as an option, and they can do that for themselves. And of course, with that self advocacy becomes an opportunity for you to tell people your strengths, your weaknesses, and then to shape and mold your position and allow that to fit with who and how you are, which of course then relates back to the coherent identity.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different stories of someone, or a group of people, a society, not knowing something was possible, and then one person does it. After that one person does it, hundreds of people do it because they have the example of knowing, hey, this is possible. And so this is kind of the same thing where you can decide to step up and be that example to other people to help lead them. And maybe that's not your goal. Maybe your goal isn't to lead other people. Maybe you're just doing it to be true to yourself. However, that does become an example for others to follow. And I know that Bernice gave a few examples when she was talking to us, and to see how and what an impact that made. And we even talked in the interview about how, we do that for ourselves. We make these changes for ourselves. We advocate for ourselves. But just by doing that, it affects the culture and affects our community, and it affects the mindset of everyone around us. And so maybe you don't go into it with the mindset or purpose of trying to advocate for other people and be that beacon of change. Maybe go into it just for yourself, but as a result, you're going to make a difference in more than just your own life. And so, yet again, another important reason why advocation for yourself and empowerment in yourself is so crucial, because it's not just about you. It may start out about you, but whether you like it or not, it's going to affect other people. And so, being aware of the change that you're trying to affect and the person you're trying to be, yet again, is so important, so that we're making the positive change rather than something that is destructive or not beneficial to ourselves or those around us.
And of course, shifting gears a little bit, the next kind of topic that we talked about was having radical responsibility. And radical responsibility is reminiscent of me of what Jocko Willink calls extreme ownership. With the addition of having a positive intention, right? So you take ownership over whatever it is that you have as radical responsibility. You take radical responsibility for your actions, but you do that with a positive intent. So it's not just, yes, I did this, woe is me, but you do that and then you try to find the good that can come out of that. Like, okay, this thing happened. Yes, it's my fault. I own up to this problem that I now made, and here's the benefit, or here's how we can benefit, or look on the bright side of what happens. And of course, having that positive intent will help to align your actions with your successes, because your actions are directly dependent on your success. Sorry, your success is directly dependent on your actions. Backwards. Your success is directly dependent on your actions. And so if you can take radical responsibility for yourself, have take that extreme ownership that Jocko Willink calls, and then couple that with a positive intent, that will align your actions so that you can succeed in lots of different areas, because your success is defined by your actions.
It's a transformative idea, whether you call it extreme ownership or radical responsibility. It's all the same kind of idea where you are taking ownership, taking responsibility, taking control of everything that happens. And I like that you mentioned, and it's important to keep in mind the positive spin to it, because you can just take responsibility for it and do nothing about it. But taking responsibility for it and trying to make the situation or whatever it is better because of that responsibility, I think is largely beneficial. And like I said, transformative. Of course, that means that you have much more responsibility or ownership over everything. And not ownership as in, this is mine, I control it. It is exactly what I want it to be. But ownership in the sense that I think responsibility is a good word, where sometimes responsibility is something that is not always directly your fault. However, you are now in charge, or you are now in ownership, and you are required to kind of deal with it. And so I do like responsibility, radical responsibility, as a parallel to extreme ownership, because I think it's, again, emphasizes the fact that, hey, even if you didn't cause this, you are now responsible for it by your own admission. And so what I'm trying to get at is, having that mindset is extremely transformative, extremely powerful. And with the positive intent, I think it can be a very encouraging, a very positive, a very beneficial trait to have. However, that literally means that you're taking ownership, responsibility for everything that you can, which is a big weight to bear. But it does come with so much potential for success and growth and empowerment. So as much as it is a job or a chore or extra work, I think it's definitely worth it. And in the end, I think, as long as you have, as you said, Mr. Bean, the positive intent and trying to transform those situations, I think it can be a great trait or philosophy to kind of live by.
Yeah. I really liked how she talked about honoring your skills and your talents, and she related this to inner peace, which we will come up to a little bit later. But honoring your skills and your talents, which will be a modality, a method for you to overcome obstacles that come your way, by honoring your strengths and your talents, your skills that you already have. And with that, by also having at least a basic understanding of the culture of the workplace, of how it operates. And of course, like you said, she talked specifically about women advocating for themselves in the workplace. And so if you are doing that, it's important to have an understanding of what the workplace is like. What is the culture like? How do things work in the workplace, so that you can advocate for yourself with the intent, or with the intent of benefiting yourself in accordance to keeping your skills and your talents at the key, at the heart of why and what you're doing for that.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear her bring that up, because I think this is a divisive topic. I think that a lot of people they either say, hey, you need to find something that you enjoy. We talked about, she gave the example of painting and how that can kind of feed into things. Find something you enjoy and try to make your career out of it. But a whole nother group of people say, have your career separate from your hobby and what you enjoy. And so it's interesting to hear her talk about that, because I think it is a fine line. There's a reason why it's a divisive topic, because we're not always able to take something that we're passionate about and make a career out of it. Sometimes we have to have our career separate from our passion. Those two things kind of exist separately. But the way I'm looking at this is that you can have your passion. If that lines up with your career, great, awesome. You can make that work for you and go really far with that. If you can't find a career that lines up with your passion, still take time to invest in that passion outside of your career. So your career is for making money. And then after you're done working, you can lead a painting workshop. You can go to a painting class. You can have a painting party with your peers and your friends, and still nurture that passion and be a leader in that area. It doesn't always have to be within work. And so again, I think it's a divisive topic. I like that she brought it up. But there are many different ways that you can still use your passion to help empower yourself and others and find your self identity within that. not always necessarily because it's your career. And maybe it was just an example she was sharing, and she has opinions on the other side of that as well. But I do think that it doesn't have to always be tied to your career, but it should still be a priority in your life that you can advocate for yourself to take part in, but also help to empower you because you're being engaged with it. And that's just my 2 cents on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and she talked about this, but when you have your passion, if your work is something wildly different or just even different at all, that you try to incorporate your passion to your work. How can you show up as a type that she talked about painting and art? How can you show up in the type of person that is in the office type of atmosphere and bring that type of passion into your work? And I think what that will do is that'll allow you to shift the focus from, man, I have to show up to work. This is so different than what I actually want to do, which is just art and creating and painting, but I have to go to work. And so by bringing that passion into your work day, the place, and allowing that part of you to overspill in the other area will bring a sense of confidence and a sense of passion and achievement and worthwhileness out of the day job, quote unquote, by allowing that version of you or that part of you to overspill into your day work life.
Yes, sir. Yeah, maybe that's what she meant, and I missed it. So I'm glad we broke that down.
Another thing that she talked about, which is wildly interesting, and I did not know this, but she said that women are more likely to undervalue themselves compared to men, which means that men overvalue themselves. And okay, I know a fair bit of men. Yep, that's true. That we, as in general, men do that. But I wasn't aware that women undervalue themselves. And so, with that in mind, it's important, especially speaking from men's side of this conversation, is when we are managing or working with women and we ask them to value themselves or what are your strengths and weaknesses, we have to understand that they are going to undervalue themselves in those situations. And we have to take that into account as we are guiding or shaping or helping, coaching, whatever, mentoring them on whatever it is. And coupled with that, she talked about how confidence equals competence. And those two things are directly related. And of course, you want to be able to communicate confidence with your body language. And so all of those things, I think, are connected together, that women are more likely to undervalue themselves compared to men, which is something that everybody needs to understand, both men and women. I think probably men need to know that, because if we are managing the women, we need to know that that's a likely outcome that is going to happen. But also to understand that competence equals competence, and that I said it backwards.
You said the same thing.
Confidence equals competence. Confidence.
Competence equals confidence.
There we go.
I believe.
That way. And then you want to communicate confidence with your body language. I said confidence and competence too many times. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you meant it this way. I don't think you did, but I think it's important to, just because most women statistically might undervalue themselves doesn't mean all women do. And so I don't think that we need to go into every conversation or every situation thinking, okay, if Sally tells me she's an 8, really she's a 10, or she tells me she's a 4, really she's a 6. Because I think what we're talking about right now is women finding their own confidence and being proud of their own confidence and self-advocating for themselves in their confidence. And so while statistically maybe most women will undervalue themselves, I don't think it's always the case. I think we're trying to advocate for the exact opposite of that. And so I don't know. I think to say that it's our responsibility as men to help push the women up is it's not, it's, yes, we need to help encourage everyone to be more powerful themselves, but I don't think we need to have those rose-colored glasses that anytime a woman comes up to us in a workplace, we have to do them a favor by stepping them up a few steps or giving them a few more points, if that makes sense. So maybe you didn't mean it that way, but hearing you say that, I don't think that I don't want it to be interpreted that way. I don't think we're saying that, hey, we as men need to do women a favor by overvaluing them from what they believe. Maybe it is a statistic, but it's not something that we need to do for them. If anything, we need to help them advocate for themselves and find their confidence and really value themselves, as opposed to just say that, hey, I know you said this, but really, because I understand how women work, I'm going to say you actually can do this. And again, I don't think you meant it that way, but I think it's important to make that distinction. Um, and on top of that, I think that when we're talking about finding your voice and really helping to advocate for everybody, it's important to give everyone that space. And, maybe someone who isn't as confident in themselves, when we can give them ownership over something and give them the ability to find their voice and use their voice, that can help bolster that confidence so that, before X project, you valued yourself at this. Now, after X project, where you've been in charge and been able to work with other people and been able to advocate for yourself, maybe you view yourself differently. And so I don't think maybe the approach is to automatically give you a few extra points. I think it's to help you find your own value and be confident in your own value so that you start to give yourself the extra points rather than me doing it for you, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think as listening, remembering what I said and listening to what you said, I think in practice, the way to put that into action would be to get feedback on what Sally, for example, says that she can do, watch and evaluate what Sally can actually do, and then give her feedback on, actually, this was right on with what you said, good job, or actually you did a little bit better than what you thought about, or what you originally told me. And so having that feedback after an opportunity to evaluate the job, task, whatever it is, and then give feedback afterwards, perhaps would be the practical way to put that concept into action.
Yes, sir. I guess the distinction I was trying to make is I don't think it's a man versus woman thing. And I feel like when it was said, hey, as a man, we need to understand that women do this. And it's, as a man, I don't think it's about what men can do for women. I think it's about what we can help women do for themselves.
Well, I think okay, so the reason I said that was because as a man, I didn't understand that women and statistically do that. And so without that understanding that that's a statistical probability, I would accept what Sally said as fact and not investigate any further. But knowing that that is a statistical probability, take what Sally says as fact until you can witness and reevaluate what she claimed, and then reevaluate if necessary, moving forward with that evaluation in mind. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think my issue is making it a gender thing. My issue is
Well, I
saying,
mean, it
I
is-
treat women differently
it
than I
is-
treat men.
But it is a gender thing.
Right, but I don't think you should go in it with a bias of, hey, Sally's not going to do very good, so let me see how she does and then try to reevaluate, as opposed to, okay, this is what.
But as a man,
Okay, so if a man tells you the same thing, would you just assume, okay, yeah, he's a 6 because he told me he's a 6?
well, because the converse of this is true as well, because men over-evaluate themselves. And if a man says, I can do this, okay, show me. Okay, well, actually, you can't do that. I'm going to cut you down and put you back, not cut you down, but
Right.
put you back into this area because you can't actually do that.
Yeah.
Because if women undervalue and men overvalue, then either way, there needs to be a evaluation that happens.
So
But-
really what we're saying is, on both sides of it, what we need to do is get their initial idea of what they can do, evaluate their actual performance, and then help them to realize, hey, you're actually 2 steps above what you said. Or, hey, man, sorry, you're actually 2 steps below what you said. Here's the proof. How can we work to get you to, where you said you were, or work to get from where you said you were up to where you were? So again, I don't think we're disagreeing with each other, except that I don't want it to be such a black and white thing of man and woman. I don't want to look at a woman differently because of what a statistic says. Vice versa, I don't want to give a man something that he doesn't deserve because of what a statistic says. I think it's important that we do the evaluation for everybody and work off what we find rather than the preconceived notion of, hey, you're going to perform less than what you said, or you're going to perform better than what you said, or vice versa, or however that works.
I do think that having that concept in your bag is beneficial when you're evaluating.
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just think we need to be careful about how we approach that, using that knowledge in the right way, not just, oh yeah, you said you're going to underperform, or you're going to underperform because of what you believe about yourself. I don't know. Maybe I can't articulate myself well, but I think it's important to use our knowledge correctly. And in this case, I think that means not undervaluing women just because they might undervalue themselves, or overvalue men because they might overvalue themselves.
I think actually this concept would allow men to overvalue women, because if they undervalue themselves and we do a math equation in our head, they say 5. Okay, well 5 probably actually means it's a 6 or 7. So we would overvalue women as opposed to undervalue, despite what they say.
Gotcha.
And undervalue men because, as a man, I can tell you we overvalue what we can do or what we should be able to do.
Sure. Well, maybe this deserves further conversation, but either way.
Fair enough. So the next topic that she talked about was having a inner power. And part of inner power is self-awareness. With self-awareness, you want to honestly identify and understand your values, your beliefs, your personalities, and you can do that through regular reflective journaling. Another part of inner peace is mindful meditation, which will give you better clarity for yourself and also allow you to strategically create an atmosphere that aligns with the type of person that you are. And again, with inner power is finding what your passion is, and as we talked about, if you're an artist, trying to let that side of you overflow into your work life so that you can bring that passion aspect to you and keep that coherent identity despite where you are.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this ties into, again, a lot of things we talked about already in this podcast: finding your values, your goals, being true to yourself. And again, we can see how that's so important to self-advocacy and self-empowerment.
Right. And of course, you talked about the immense power of positive self-talk, which is directly related to your growth as a person. And you want to consistently empower yourself to be a better version of yourself. And a great way to do that is by having positive self-talk. Another thing is to, and she said this a little bit differently. I wrote this point as what Jordan Peterson says, but to compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. And what that was really in regard to is just not comparing who you are to who somebody else is and trying to live up to their standards, because you are your own person and live your own life, not somebody else's life. And again, she talked about that concept, a little bit different phrasing, but the phrasing that I wrote it down is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. From there we talked about the benefits of coaching and how coaching really empowers others. So the coach will empower the coachee, the person who is being coached, to empower themselves, and with that will help them to recognize their inner power, which is talking about, basically understanding who and how you are as a individual.
Yeah, throughout the whole conversation, she mentioned various times to use your resources to help you along your growth and help you in this journey. And so she talked about reading books. She talked about listening to podcasts, watching videos, going to coaches. And I think that's so important because as much as we're talking about self-advocacy and self-empowerment, it's sometimes hard to always draw from things that are within you, but you can take from outside sources to add to that well that you can draw that power from. And so, coaching, reading, listening to podcasts, watching videos. And she talked about, I forget how she said it exactly, but basically she just said, never stop learning, never stop seeking information, seeking to become a better person. I think that's how all this kind of ties into using that to help empower yourself and feel that and fuel your advocacy, because you have the competence, which, as we previously mentioned, leads into your confidence. And so I love that she is so for or such a promoter of many different resources and ways to help build yourself up and educate yourself, because I do believe it's a very pivotal part of empowerment and advocacy.
Right. And one of the things that she talked about for coaching, one of the benefits of having a coach, which is should be obvious, but I didn't recognize this, was to have a opportunity to have deep reflection and self-knowing. And really you have this by building a good emotional connection to the coach, and that being done within a safe space, so you can talk about with the coach things that you likely don't talk about with your friends or your family, because of the type of atmosphere that the coach provides. And through that, again, you get you get the opportunity to have deep self-reflection and then self-knowing, which is able then to identify your strengths and really make those strengths impossible to ignore, because of the type of connection and self-knowing that you have, that is derived from having a coach.
Yes, sir.
Well, do you have anything to close with for our conversation, or again, rather your conversation with Bernice?
Yeah, once again, it's great to have her on and be able to learn from her and her expertise and her passion for this topic. As we just talked, you and I now, I mean, there's a whole lot more that we could explore into how this affects women, how this affects men, how this affects everyone, and whether you are a woman or a man, whether you're in a workplace, whether you're working on a passion, whether you're trying to develop yourself. Self-advocacy and self-empowerment are crucial in kind of going through that journey. And so as much as we can learn from Bernice, and as much more as she has to offer, there's so many other people and places that we can go. And I think that this is a key trait to add to your core values, your skills, and something to keep in mind as you're working on developing yourself. And we keep trying to make ourselves better every single day. Make sure you follow us on social media. You can find the podcast at Prestigious Pod.
You can find me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
You can find me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
And if you like our content and would like to subscribe to our email, you can do that via our social media or on the website.
Make sure you also join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions.
If you would like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life by me, Chris Bean, you can do that by reaching out on one of my social medias, or by emailing the podcast at prestigiousinitiative@gmail.com.
Those are the points. Make sure you come back next week for even more points and another great conversation. Until next time, I'm Chris Kent.
And I'm Chris Bean.